Morning.
Good morning.
Call this meeting to order. This executive committee meeting, and the first item on our agenda, do we have to take a roll call? You're most of you are here, so we're going to approve the minutes of the meeting of April 8th this year. I have a motion by Mayor Voss, seconded by Mayor Morrison. All in favor, signify it. All in favor, vote.
Pressing a button.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on. Any public communications? We haven't received none. We'll move to the review of the draft board agendas. Kim will give us a report on that.
Okay, first item 3A, your May 27th draft board business agenda. Item 1 is approval of 3 sets of meeting minutes from your April meetings. And 2 and 3, your standard public comments, communications, member comments, and actions from policy advisory committees. Moving on to consent, we have approval proposals, solicitations, and contract awards. We do anticipate a solicitation for an on-call environmental services, and then a contract award for one of our next segments of the South Bay Bus Rapid Transit Project. Items 5, 6, and 7 are all environmental documents or exemptions for some of your bike early action programs that we're asking you to either approve or adopt. Item 8 is an item on the fiscal year 2017 Transportation Development Act, or TDA, productivity improvement recommendations. This item is going to the Transportation Committee next week and is pending a recommendation. Item 9 is an update on the cap and trade, affordable housing, and sustainable communities program full applications. A few months ago, you approved submitting some applications, and we did get invited to apply for these from ARB. So you'll be asking the board to approve a resolution to submit the 2 applications. Item 10 is the criteria for the next cycle of the Regional Active Transportation Program of projects that we need the board to, the Transportation Committee will be reviewing next week, and we'll bring to the board for submittal of the criteria to the California Transportation Commission. Item 11 is a standard item that comes every year. When the Department of Finance estimates come in, we are required to take a look at the weighted voting formula. We don't expect actually any changes based upon the latest DOF estimates. Items 12 and 13 are your standard quarterly report, one on developments in the financial market and your finance report, and the other on transportation projects, the progress that's happened during the last quarter. And then items 14 and 15 on consent are your standard monthly report on meetings and events attended on behalf of SANDAG, and a report summarizing the delegated actions taken by the executive director. Then moving to reports, item 16 would be the proposed final fiscal year 2017 program budget. That's the subject of one of the reports at your meeting today. Item 17, we thought we'd be able to bring the Gilman Drive Bridge project, the supplement for the GMP, but we're still negotiating with the CMGC contractor and I'm working with UC San Diego on this, so we would like to move that one to next month, the following month on that. But we are bringing under item 18 supplement 4 to the CMGC contract, and that's actually for the big Mid-Coast project. We've successfully negotiated a guaranteed maximum price with that, and it's going to Transportation Committee next Friday, so it's pending a recommendation and be coming to you guys at the end of the month at the board. Item 19 is an item on the ARGIS data sharing memorandum of understanding. This is regard to data sharing practices with ARGIS and ARGIS member agencies. So this has been something that first started probably about a year ago. It's finally kind of coming to fruition. It's gone to the Public Safety Committee, and they are recommending approval of this data sharing MOU. Item 20 is the funding measure. We'll be bringing back, you're having your first discussion of the draft ordinance and ballot language today, and we'll be bringing it back 2 weeks from today to the board with any changes or modifications that the board may be discussing or asking about today. And then items 21, 22, and 23 are continued public comments, upcoming meetings, and adjournment. It's a pretty full item for your May meeting. And if any questions, I'll move to item 3B, which is your June 10th draft board policy agenda. There's public comments, communications, member comments, and really there's the one item on that agenda, which would be the first reading of the funding measure, the ordinance. That's it. And continued public comments, upcoming meetings, and adjournment.
Okay, so it'd be appropriate to
Yeah, motion to approve.
approve these board agendas.
Move approval.
Second. Okay. And, by Mayor Morrison, please cast your votes. And that passes unanimously. Move on now to item number 4. Oops.
Good morning.
Tim will give us his report.
So we are here today to present the final review of the proposed fiscal year 2017 program budget. The draft budget presentations in March, we reviewed the expected funding status, highlighted the expected fiscal year 2017 accomplishments, and summarized staffing, pay for performance, and employment benefits programs, including a proposal to reduce the agency's unfunded pension liability. Today's report focuses on changes made since the draft March budget. So the proposed fiscal year 2017 program budget totals $1.36 billion and includes $964.2 million projected spending on capital improvements for next year, primarily consisting of the Transit Early Action Program. $43.6 million for the planning program or the overall work program or OWP, and $55.2 million for the regional operations. I will now turn it over to Tim, who will talk about the proposed changes since the March draft budget.
Thanks, Andre. Proposed changes since the March draft are shown in the agenda report on pages 3 to 7 or pages 16 to 20 on your tablet. The changes include new projects proposed since March as well as revisions to projects shown in the March draft. I'll start with changes to the planning budget, the OWP budget. Between the draft and the proposed final, staff has identified work and contractual commitments from the current fiscal year that will need to be carried over in FY 2017, along with their corresponding funding. These include travel demand modeling, regional land inventory systems, geographic information systems, and a fresh look at air quality and climate impacts of border delays projects. These will carry over for a total of $566,000 in current year funding. Other changes identified in the report are due to refinements in the scope of work or project cost estimates. For example, additional survey work for the household travel behavior survey is proposed under the Transportation Studies project to collect travel data for military bases and non-motorized travel, as well as to coordinate survey instruments with other MPOs in the state. This is an increase of $145,000. And an additional $277,000 is proposed for San Diego Forward, the regional plan, to begin community-based outreach and refine project evaluation criteria for the next plan update. There are also proposed reductions to several project budgets in FY 2017. Some of these are due to funding constraints, as the case with transportation demand management, which is a $387,000 decrease, and others are due to delay in planned tasks for the following year. For example, the planned update and refresh of the SANDAG website is now scheduled for completion in FY 2018 and is pushing out $188,000 in consulting costs. Another change worth noting is a pilot project originally funded by the Air Resources Board grant that had to be terminated, reducing the FY 2017 budget by $183,000. A car share partner, Cardigo, recently decided to reduce its service area and they're transitioning their all-electric vehicles to gas, which forced the cancellation of the project. For regional operations, most of the changes made in operations related to the largest projects, which are due to shifting timelines and priorities approved by the funding agencies. The various largest work was reprioritized to respond to new UASI grant of $226,000 to better align with other pending grant expiration dates. Changes to the capital budget since March show a reduction in FY 2017 spending along with an increase to the multi-year capital budget. The Mid-Coast Light Rail Transit is proposed to increase by $25.1 million, bringing the revised budget to $2.17 billion. The Mid-Coast capital cost remains the same. The increase is really an update to the financing costs in order to be consistent with the FTA submittals. By including the finance costs as part of the project will allow us a portion of these costs to be reimbursable. The State Route 905, 125, 11 southbound connectors has a proposed budget increase of $61.7 million, bringing the total project budget to $68.9. This is good news because it's a result of a recent approval by the California Transportation Commission to add about $50 million in CHOP funding, state funding, for the construction phase of the project, which previously was not in the budget. And it will be matched with about $12 million in SR 125 toll revenues. Also, the State Route 125 pavement overlay is a new project for $7.9 million, proposed to complete the pavement preservation of State Route 125 between Otay Mesa Road and State Route 54. The project will be funded with SR 125 toll revenues. Other projects and programs where budgets and cash flow estimates and material changes include the I-5, I-8 West and North connector improvements. That had a budget decrease of $2 million, $1 million of which for the project savings will be applied to the I-5 Voight direct access ramp project. Additionally, updated project budgets have been included for some regional bikeway projects to reflect changes in cost estimates or to add new project phases. So overall, as noted on the table and in pages 4 to 5 of the agenda report, or 17 and 18 of the tablet, these and other proposed changes will decrease FY 2017 spending by $46 million and increase the multi-year capital program by $120 million for a revised total of $8.1 billion. Back to Andre.
Okay, thanks. So as introduced during the draft budget review in March, the proposed final fiscal year 2017 program includes a plan to pay down $3 million in the CalPERS pension benefit liability using OWP contingency reserves. Currently, staff is working on finalizing our RFP to hire a firm that would provide the necessary administrative oversight and investment management services for managing the new Section 115 trust. Other proposed uses of the OWP contingency reserve include $150,000 for continued work on the new funding measure and $750,000 on the regional household travel behavior survey that Tim just mentioned. Now, after use of these contingency funds, we expect fiscal year 2017 to end with $8.6 million in the contingency reserve, which is 20% of the OWP budget, which is twice the amount required per our board policy 30, which requires 10%. The staffing plan, pay for performance, and employment benefit proposals have not changed since the March draft. So as for the next steps, today the Executive Committee is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors approve resolution number RTC 2016-05, Attachment 1, adopting the proposed final 2017 program budget in substantially the same form as shown in Attachment 2. That concludes our presentation. We'll be glad to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Andre. Are there any questions, staff? Any comments? Move approval. Okay, I have a motion for approval. Mayor Voss? Second. Second by Mayor Wells. Please cast your votes. That motion's approved unanimously. Thank you, guys. The next item, item 5, is proposed fiscal year 2016 program budget amendment. And that report is going to be given by Rob. Good morning. Good morning.
So at a special meeting on April 29th, the board gave direction to staff to prepare a final expenditure plan, the ordinance to support the expenditure plan, and ballot language for a November 2016 measure. And that's going to be discussed at the board meeting following this meeting. The budget amendment before you today is proposed in order to continue the public education activities that were initiated at the beginning of this year. And as you recall, a budget amendment was approved by the Executive Committee in December to conduct intensive public outreach and education efforts aimed at raising awareness about projects in San Diego Forward, the regional plan, as well as a potential funding measure. And those outreach efforts included mailings, the telephone town halls that were conducted in January, social media, flyers, videos, a survey, as well as other outreach efforts. And those efforts were conducted in advance of the public information survey that was conducted in April. And that also was paid for with the budget amendment that you approved in December. So if approved today, this would enable staff to continue implementing those education and outreach activities associated with the regional plan and the expenditure plan that the board is discussing. And that would enable us to work through the end of July. So today you are asked to, the Executive Committee is asked to approve an amendment to the FY16 program budget to transfer up to $100,000 from the Contingency Reserve Fund to the Regional Quality of Life Funding Strategy Overall Work Program element in order to inform the public about the projects and programs in the potential funding measure. So that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions? Seeing none, motion approved. Motion by Mayor Morrison, second by Mayor Wood. Please cast your votes. This is for public outreach. Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you, Rob. We'll go now to item number 6, legislative status reports. And Robin will be handling this.
Hi, good morning. We wanted to talk to you this morning about a few bills in particular that are moving through the state legislature, but first just a quick update on the special session on transportation. Chairman Jim Bell introduced some amendments to his transportation funding bill a couple of weeks ago, SBX 1-1, that incorporates several ideas that have been included in some of the competing measures floating around, including increased funding for transit, CEQA reform efforts, as well as establishing the California Transportation Commission as an independent agency. So the amended bill now provides for about $6.5 billion for transportation, which compared to the governor's $3.6 billion proposal and Chairman Fraser's $7.8 billion proposal. More details on each of these proposals can be found in attachment 1 of your reports or page 45 on your iPads. The governor is expected to release his May revise later this morning, so it'll be telling to see how much, if at all, his proposal has changed since he first introduced it in January. Also wanted to note that Assembly Bill 1746, which is our Bus on Shoulders bill introduced by Assemblymember Stone, passed unanimously out of the Assembly and is now pending action in the Senate. Okay, now we have outlined 3 bills in your reports for the Executive Committee to consider taking action on today. The first is Senate Bill 885, introduced by Senator Lois Wilk, and it's outlined on page 42 on your iPads. It would eliminate the right of a public agency to contract with design professionals for upfront legal defense costs related to claims against their work. When contracting with a design professional, public agencies like SANDAG often place a clause in our contracts that require the design professionals to defend us if a claim or lawsuit directly related to the design services work is filed against the agency. However, SB 885 specifies that a design professional would not have a duty to defend against these claims. In fact, it would prohibit any clauses within the contracts from requiring them to do so. As such, if this legislation was passed, it could cause SANDAG to proceed through a full trial on matters that otherwise might be settled, thereby resulting in significant legal expenses to SANDAG. SB 885 is sponsored by the American Council of Engineering Companies of California. There's about 100 entities registered in support of the bill and another 100 registered in opposition. As you can imagine, it's the design professionals that are supporting the bill and then public agencies like SANDAG and contractors that are opposing the bill. Opposition to this bill is consistent with goal number 14B of our legislative program, which supports efforts to pursue legislation and or policies that promote governmental efficiencies and cost savings. The staff is recommending an opposed position to the bill. I can continue to the other ones, or if we want to stop.
Please.
Okay. The next bill, outlined on page 43 on your iPads, is Assembly Bill 2289, introduced by Assemblymember Fraser. This is a technical cleanup bill that I mentioned at our last meeting that makes it clear that operational improvements are an eligible investment under the SHOP program, which is a state highway operations and protection program. As you may recall, the O in SHOP operations is something that SANDAG has been focused very closely on over the past year as we've been discussing the state special session on transportation. So while this bill doesn't substantively impact the way that SHOP is carried out, it does show that our efforts are having an impact on the conversation regarding state funding for transportation. AB 2289 is supported by the Automobile Club of Southern California as well as the California Transportation Commission, and there's no known opposition. Support of the bill is consistent with goal number 7A of the SANDAG legislative program, which supports the pursuit of policy and our legislative changes to improve the planning and implementation of the Regional Transportation Plan and the SCS. And staff is recommending a support position for this bill. And then finally, you may also remember we discussed Assembly Bill 2170 by Assemblymember Fraser in our last meeting. This is a bill that would require any federal freight formula funding that comes to the state be implemented through the Trade Corridor Improvement Fund, or the TCIF program. Under Prop 1B, you may recall that about $250 million was used to construct infrastructure programs in the San Diego region through the TCIF program, including port access improvements, Phase 1 of State Route 11, and several double-track projects along the Los Angeles corridor. Future funding under TCIF could support projects like Otay Mesa East Land Port of Entry, State Route 11 Phase 2, as well as other key improvements to the North Coast Corridor and border infrastructure network improvements. AB 2170 is supported by more than a dozen regional transportation entities, as well as the Automobile Club of Southern California and the California Transportation Commission. The Department of Finance has registered opposition to this bill, stating that the administration is still working to identify the most efficient, appropriate use for any new federal funding. However, the Southern California Association of Governments has requested our support for the bill, and it's consistent with goals number 5A and 7A of the SANDAG legislative program, which support the pursuit of efforts that address border transportation infrastructure needs consistent with the RTP, as well as policy and or legislative changes needed to implement the RTP and SCS. Staff is recommending a support position on this bill as well. And that concludes my reports.
Thank you, Robin. Are there any questions?
Is she reading from a teleprompter? I don't see a teleprompter anywhere, but this is good. Just
People that know what they're talking about don't read it. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember
Great
Gloria.
report. Always impressed. On the last bill, 2170, the mention of governor asking for more time. Do you have any idea? I'm happy to support. I get the recommendation, but is there anything that is what is behind door number 2 any better for us, or is it pretty much assumed that would be?
So in their opposition letter, they mentioned the STIP and SHOP, and so just trying to read between the lines, we're guessing maybe what they want to do is use this funding to fund the same projects that are already in STIP, keeping it revenue neutral, so it wouldn't mean any new funding for us under STIP, and then using that money and swapping it out under SHOP. And since San Diego doesn't typically do as well under SHOP, it would still be better for us to go to TCIF.
Okay.
But again, we're just reading the tea leaves. We don't know exactly what they would want to do with the
And I would add that under TCIF, there were certain trade corridors, there were 4 of them identified statewide. And in San Diego, we're all by ourselves. So where the other trade corridors, you get into the LA trade corridor, for example, you have LA and Orange County and Riverside and San Bernardino all trying to figure out which pieces. So we see, Senator Wesso actually carried a bill that created the TCIF as a vehicle to do this. Our border, even though it has statewide benefits, so if you look at a lot of the goods coming across the border, they're not just staying in San Diego, they're going someplace else. It doesn't always fare that well if we're playing in a statewide game, but this would dedicate funds to that trade corridor that would allow us to address, we think, some of the issues on the border and some of the issues on the LoSAN corridor. We're still, we've made a tremendous amount of progress over the last decade or so. We started out with about half of the railroad track being double track, the other half being single track. Today we're at about 66% of it double track. These kinds of funds could help us in a dedicated way, so we think we fare better when the funds are dedicated than if we got to compete on a statewide process. And we're competing with Alturas, California, versus stuff that we may need in San Diego.
I would just add, historically under
Ross is, excuse me, or Mayor Morrison, in the reverse positions in a second. Mayor Voss, please cast your vote. Cast the vote. And now motion's approved unanimously. And that really completes everything. We have an upcoming meeting on Friday, June 10th is our next meeting. Any other comments?
Yes,
Yes?
Chairman Roberts, there has been some confusion about the Board of Directors tally votes. And I just talked to John, and it's clear to me that the county tally votes goes to the A and the alternate. But the city of San Diego, if the mayor is not there and Councilmember Zapp is there, then it goes to the most experienced thing. I thought that was a Sandag policy, but it's not.
It's a city.
It's a city, and I think it would be good to send a memo to the board to clarify this confusion.
Yeah, and each city
Right.
kind of tells us how their process is going to work, and so that comes through a resolution
Right.
that the city council of San Diego passed.
I think many, if not most, of the board of directors of Sandag don't know that.
Okay, any other comments, questions, observations, praise, anything? Okay, we'll deem this meeting to be adjourned. Next meeting, June 10th. Thank you.